everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Patient Insights and Clinical Trials panel discussion. Today we have Dr. Pamela Kryskow and Sabrina Ramkellawan joining us for what's going to be an insightful and really important conversation, one that I'm really excited about. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and we're really grateful for your time. And to start, I thought it would be great if Dr. Pamela and Sabrina, if you could introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your backgrounds.
Wonderful. Thanks, Parveen. Thanks for having us here. So I'm a medical doctor, primarily in chronic pain. I also am a researcher. I have a number of research protocols and trials going on related to psilocybin, Mdma, and ketamine, wellness and neurogenesis. I'm an adjunct professor at Vancouver Island University and a clinical instructor at UBC. And I'm the medical lead on the Roots to Thrive program, which is a program for resiliency for PTSD in healthcare responders at the front lines. And within that, we have 3 psychedelic sessions within that 12-week program. And also celebrating over 13,000 enrollees in the microdose.me trial, and that's fun to announce because today is World Microdosing Day and also Jim Fadiman's birthday. So just want to share that out there to everyone.
That's amazing. And Dr. Pam, that was launched in November, wasn't it? 2019.
Yeah, just over a year. Yeah, over a year and a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Sabrina?
Hello. So They just decided to start construction right at this time of the storm. So I was trying to close the windows. My name is Sabrina Ramkellawan. I started my career as a registered nurse, and I've been doing clinical trials for about 25 years now. I started a company in early 2020. So I've done clinical trials in a lot of different areas. Cannabis, probably in the last 7 years. I've been did about 12 clinical trials. Excited to start on the psychedelic because I'm really excited about psychedelic research right now. Early 2020, I started a company called Node Group, and it is a global CRO. It's female-led, female-owned, and we are focused in on cannabis research, but also psychedelic research. So I also run a nonprofit called Clinical Research Association of Canada that focuses on education for researchers, and we put on events as well. And I'm the research committee lead for MAPS Canada as well, just because I don't get enough of psychedelic research. I also volunteer there as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that, for the introductions. So just to start, I wanted to start off by asking if Dr. Pam and Sabrina, if you could give us an overview of some of the research and clinical trials that you're currently involved in.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks. So we're the microdose.me data has been really useful, and we really wanted to do a big, huge trial to kind of figure out where are the benefits. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence around that, and this was a prospective observational trial. So with a lot of that data, we're actually moving into the clinical trial protocols. So around concussions, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so exploring that. And that is one of the main things. I'm also a sub-investigator on one of the MAPS MDMA trial in Vancouver. And then we've got a number of protocols running through ethics on the program that we run. We're really looking at access and making sure people have good access. And so it's a group therapy program. So we're researching that too, to make sure that we can put good evidence out there for others.
Exciting.
I'll hand it over to Sabrina.
Sure.
So with us right now, a lot of our clients are just either starting preclinical work or looking at just finishing preclinical. So a lot of our work has been working with companies to start mapping out their clinical trial pathway, because as you know, clinical trials, there's a lot of funding required. So really helping them map out what those costs look like, their 2021, 2022, 2023 plan in terms of their phase 1, 2, and 3. So a lot of it's mapping, because sometimes they can't get funding without having the mapping, without having the plan. So a lot of our work is related to that, because that's really critical. But we are looking at psilocybin, depression. We're also helping our clients assess where's the best place and country to conduct these clinical trials. In some cases, they're looking at Canada. In some places, they're choosing countries that may not be the most appropriate if they're looking to market in Canada and the US because of the regulatory regulatory bodies may not accept it. So there's a lot that has to go in. We're even finding challenges with principal investigators. So Pam, I'm gonna write your name down as a potential investigator, because we have, addiction specialists, because we're looking at studies in addiction. We're looking at psilocybin depression. But although we have experienced investigators within those therapeutical areas, some are not as comfortable yet in the psychedelic space. So, it'd be great to have some sort of community with doctors and investigators where we can kind of help each other out, because I'm looking for experienced investigators that could potentially support other investigators that don't have maybe enough knowledge on the psychedelic side. But I've been trying to share articles and publications. It's almost like I'm convincing now, trying to convince investigators. So that's a lot of my work. It seems like. What was that?
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk for sure. I need more investigators. Yeah. So that's been a lot of the work. I've been really excited about a partnership with Legion Veterans Village. We're looking at building a framework for research with veterans and first responders. So it's a passion project for me. I've done a lot of work with PTSD and veterans and first responders. So it's just such an exciting partnership to be working with them. In terms of MAPS Canada, I'm not doing the MAPS Canada study, but on the volunteer side, MAPS Canada is looking at MDMA and eating disorders. So anorexia and binge eating. I feel like, Pamela, you're probably on one of these. And they're also looking at cognitive processing therapy and MDMA. So looking at couples. I apologize, it's loud here. So looking at couples therapy as well. So I think it's a very interesting approach.
It's interesting because Sabrina, you touched on, bringing kind of the communities together and working together. So that kind of just is a wonderful segue into the next question about how can the clinical trials help us to understand how psychedelic assisted therapy can be integrated into the wider medicinal framework. So, Dr. Pam,
I could jump into that. Well, it's really just a continuation, right? These medicines were legal before. They went through a period of prohibition from the war on drugs in both countries and across the world and in a number of countries. And so it's just a return back in. I think what is as soon as people get beyond the propaganda that was fed many of us in the 70s and 80s, and they start to look at the clinical trials that were happening before, I think it's the logical progression. We want everybody to be scientifically curious and look at where things can be helpful. And so I don't think it's any different. If you look in the 80s, just before MDMA was scheduled, I mean, it was one of the most exciting psychotherapeutic adjuncts. Psychotherapists were using it for couples therapy, and they didn't want it to be scheduled, and they actually lobbied very hard against that. In Canada really led the way on LSD trials and psilocybin trials at Weyburn, Saskatchewan, around alcoholism. And so I think all we need to do is, it's a very mature topic, and as if we approach it as adults, then we look at what are the clinical indications that these medicines can help with, and how can we bring them back into thoughtful use, and then provide the data that we need. A lot of the data is already there, so we just need to reactivate it and move forward. I think the biggest challenge is the regulators. They're very unsure of how to move forward with this. They don't have the right check boxes. And so we have to very kindly work hand in hand with them and show them that, these are safe medications and that we can bring these back. But I think it's just going back. It's just about the scientific inquiry. What are we trying to help? What are we trying to fix? How do people want to feel better? And are these medicines helpful for that?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pam. And Sabrina, did you want to add to that?
Sorry, if you could just ask it again. I had to close another window.
No problem.
The nuances of working from home, right?
No, and I can tell the noise is gone. I don't hear it anymore, so it worked.
It paused a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking about how clinical trials are helping to understand how psychedelic assisted therapies can be integrated into the wider medicinal framework.
Yeah, I think it's really important that when people are doing clinical trials, that they actually conduct the clinical trials the way they expect to be putting into practice, right? And so, when we look at MDMA is that so helpful with PTSD. 50 to 60% of participants no longer had symptoms, and that's huge. And so now when you start layering assisted therapy in different aspects and looking at couples and all that kind of stuff, it's really great to be able to ensure that, because that's what we're doing these clinical trials for. We're trying to understand how to implement this in practice. And so that's, extremely important to include, the therapy piece of it for sure.
And I'd just like to jam on that a little bit. I love that you brought that up, because that is really what's important. And this is really the challenge right now. Like, we want to do the trials based on how people are going to use these substances. And right now the hoops, as Sabrina well knows, are not, we're for instance, in psilocybin, most of the trials are with psilocybin, a lab synthesized psilocybin, which is great, it's standardized, but 99% of the people out there right now are not using lab synthesized psilocybin. They're using the whole mushroom. And so we have this transition time where we have to help the regulators go, oh, well, how can we actually study what people are doing? And then how can we make it better? How can we, or safer, or whatever we need to do? Because that is ultimately their concern, is patient safety. And that's what we all want. We don't want to harm anyone, right? So I think thank you for bringing that up, because that's really important, that we try to figure out how to study what's actually happening and how people will actually use these and how therapists will actually use these.
I've had some discussions with people that want to do clinical trials, and they want to have that pharmaceutical approach. No, we just want to give psychedelics on its own, and it's like, okay, but you're dealing with patients with trauma. Or are you not going to do the therapy piece of it? It's like, no, but it's more marketable that way. It's like, okay, but if that's not how it's going to be used, so you have these debates of how to approach something, right? So it's really, I think it's so key that you do clinical trials and how that standard of practice is going to look like in front of patients, and how you're going to be able to manage patients down the road. So I think that's kind of a debate that's happening now.
Mm-hmm. So Sabrina and Dr. Pam, as part of that debate about how to do the clinical trials and putting them into practice, there's also been that discussion around inclusivity that we've been talking a lot about. So how has that changed today, and how does that make research that's being done today, more valid, or increase the validity of it? Because in the past, maybe certain communities or genders of females might have not been included in these trials. So how has that come into play and changed?
Well, we're talking about it. That's the big thing. Is before we didn't, right? And even before psychedelics came in, you look at the populations that were being studied, primarily men, and women were excluded, and then all cultures are excluded, and the biases and stuff. And so the best, what I say is, we're progressing. Like, this is better. The conversation is happening, and you had Stacey Wallen on the previous panel, and her and I have had a number of conversations about this, and I've looked wide and far in the business community and looking at how do you recruit inclusively? Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? If you always recruit the same way, you're going to get the same people. And so we really need people to come to us and say, hey, if you want to recruit from my community, here's how you do it. So we need to learn. Like, we don't know the answers. We're wide open to hear how to do that. And if someone is part of a community that is not being included, please talk to us, reach out, like, send my email out there widely. Tell us how to recruit, because we want it to be good. We want to do good science. We want everyone to be involved if they want to be involved, but we also realize they have to trust science. I mean, there's been portions of the population in the past, not now anymore, but in the past, that were really abused by the experimental process. And because of that abuse, we have so many more processes in now. Like, the consent form never used to exist. Now the consent form is pages long, right, to make sure people know what they're doing. So that historical abuse, I understand. Fortunately, the process has changed, and now we need the communities to tell us, how do we reach out? Because we want to. We actually really want to. Yeah. And we want to do it the way they want it done, like, not the way we want it done. We want their voice in there right from the beginning.
Right. Great point, Dr. Pam.
One of the studies looking at a lot of the psychedelic studies that were done, I think from 2007 up to fairly currently, showed that there's 83% of the participants in psychedelic trials were non-Hispanic white. So there's definitely an issue. And when you do clinical trials, you have to have participation representation that is indicative of the condition that you're looking to study or you're looking to market. So that's really, really important. There are definitely ways to make sure that you have diversity. And like you said, you said exactly right. If you do the study the same way with the same investigators and they're only looking at their pool of patients, you're likely not going to get that diversity. You do have to go out into the community. I'm doing this now with COVID trials where we're actually on a weekly basis tracking. So when we look at diversity, there's an FDA guidance 2020. And when we look at diversity, it's age, it's gender, it's ethnicity, race, it's also rare disease, and it's also comorbidity. So there's a lot of aspects to diversity and what that means. And so really tracking it, but also it's really important to look at having a diverse research group that is indicative of the community as well. So that's really important. So, there's a lot of those things that need to happen. Also recognizing that there's a lot of communities that actually don't even get diagnosed with depression, don't get diagnosed with PTSD. We're not even looking at race-based trauma as well, which is not even something that's looked at. So if you don't have a mechanism of not only to recruit, but also have a way to actually diagnose so that they're able to fit the inclusion of the study, then you're not really making that open and inclusive to the community. So those are things that are really important. And I teach diversity in clinical trials. So there's lots of things you can do. So I'm happy if someone's doing a psychedelic clinical trial, call me. I can help you with like specific steps that you could do to make your clinical trials more diverse.
Really great points, because for someone, I always think of inclusivity just to be, you have you fill a certain criteria or checkbox, of having certain backgrounds or communities or genders. But it's so much more than that, as you and Sabrina and Dr. Pam, you've just mentioned. So that's really insightful. Thank you for that. It's a whole other perspective.
I love the solutions, what are the solutions? How do we get to the solutions? And I think this is actually a place where the Canadian Psychedelic Association and, MAPS Canada and across the border into the US and MAPS USA, this is where we can really link hands and work together. Like, this is where we can be a resource and say, hey, you know what, if you've got an idea for a clinical trial, let's get it listed on a website where people can fund it and see and join in or help, and let's amplify people who should get the funding, that maybe aren't as well connected. We can do that as a community. Like, this whole movement in psychedelic medicine is different. We can do it differently if we want to. We can elevate funding to people that are not getting funding. We can ask the regular players, can you step out of the way so that your lesser knowns on your team can move up the ladder here? Like, this is a different world. If we want to frame it that way, we can do it that way. And people that are researching a lot should be looking at that anyways, looking at their team and going, who on my team can I pull up so they can maybe lead the charge here and not be so competitive, but be more community oriented, which is, I think, really what we want to be doing this time around with these medicines.
Sabrina, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add that one of the things that we're doing, the research committee at MAPS Canada, is that we're looking to post on the MAPS Canada website what psychedelic research is happening, kind of who the researchers are, what research is happening, because I think that, I bet you if we all spoke, a lot of us are doing the same research. We're trying to figure out the same things when we could be collaborative. And also posting on the website is also helpful for participants to hopefully have a wider reach beyond just the patients that belong to that investigator, to be able to have people kind of that are interested in participating in research to have access to, whether it's psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, whatever it is, that they can go on the website, and if it's actively recruiting, they know and who the contact person is to be part of that study. So that's one of the initiatives that we're looking at doing.
That's amazing. That's a really great idea to do that. And I think just on the back of that, I wanted to take a look at a little bit about the patient journey. So where in terms of the industry are we when it comes to clinician knowledge? within general practice, and what improvements are still needed to improve that patient journey to make it smoother?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, you're talking about like the patient in a psychedelic therapy. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's actually getting better and better. You know, there are so many clinicians working together, training together. There are a lot of trainings happening, going on, and I think what we're seeing is constant quality improvement. I'm in so many MD groups where we're talking, where people are sharing and talking and asking for advice. And I see the whole level of knowledge being raised, because what somebody else may raise that I had no idea about, suddenly I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it from that perspective. And then the bigger brain feeds in. So I think this really speaks to that. If clinicians, therapists, physicians, underground are part of an accountability group or a learning group, then you learn. And then, because we're all patients too, right? Like it's not a line like you're a therapist or a patient. Like you live in both worlds. So if we're coming to it from what we want and a constant quality improvement, then we're going to get quality improvement. And I know in our program, the Roots to Thrive program with ketamine assisted therapy, we have an anonymous feedback for our patients so that they can feedback at any moment in time, either a question or an improvement. And we just keep that there all the time, so that every time the program is getting better. And I would suggest that every clinician wants to have something like that. You want anonymous, safe feedback from your patients, if not directly to you, but to a third party that can then forward them on to you amalgamated. Then that's great. But I really think we're moving along, and I think what's happening is we've kind of all come from Indigenous roots where we healed in community. And we've had a separation, and then we went the Western medical, the one-on-one model. And I think what we're seeing is a return coming back to that community, like, because we're talking about journeys and container and set and setting and all this. And so this group learning is elevating. You know, there's podcast stuff on Clubhouse. People are learning and learning and learning and elevating. And I think anyone that's tuned in anywhere is going to create a better and better patient experience, I hope. And that's the reason you should be here, is to be better and better and better.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Pam. And Sabrina, did you have any thoughts on that as well?
With respect to clinician knowledge, I mean, for me, that's a big thing with the investigators, is that they're nervous because they don't have that knowledge. Now, a lot of them do have knowledge with ketamine because that's been around for a while and they're used to those and doing infusions for pain and off-label depression. But when it comes to the other psychedelics, not very much experience. So that's something that's definitely needed.
Great. And in terms of training, what sorts of training is currently available out there for anyone who's wanting a career in therapy, and what's coming soon, maybe that's going to make a difference in terms of addressing that barrier to knowledge or feeling more confident in what you know?
I could jump in. Yeah. So there's a lot going on already. So CIIS has obviously been going for quite a while. They've doubled the size and they're on the East Coast and West Coast now. MAPS has a firm commitment. I think, if I remember correctly, 9,000 therapists they want to train, and they're expanding like crazy. I think almost everybody I know is in a MAPS training right now. So, which is hilarious, which is great. And then there's a lot of things springing up in the void right now. Like you're seeing a lot of organizations like Fluence, et cetera, like ketamine, the American Society of Ketamine Providers. There's a lot more. But the nice thing that I like here, what's happening is that as these medicines are going to become legal, is that the academic institutions are training. So we're actually fall of next year, we have a postgraduate certificate in psychedelic assisted therapy on Vancouver Island. That will grandfather in people that already have the experience. We're not going to make people jump through the hoops again. If you've got experience, you get grandfathered in, and you get a practicum experience with that, which is what's missing from a lot of the programs. Is there is a real practical that you get to have an experience. I know there's other universities across Canada and the US that are looking at announcing programs. So I think what we're going to see very soon is we're going to see, just like there's a psychology department at every university, just like there's, if you have a medical school at a university, there's a psychiatry department. This is just going to be added on to that. It's just going to be a tool, not a standalone. And in the meantime, there's really good programs. And for the physicians and therapists that come to me and ask, like, what do I do? You know, MAPS, obviously, CIIS, getting some somatic therapies like you know, like Hakomi, or, you know, something that you understand the embodiment of trauma and trauma-informed practice, culturally safe informed practice therapies, internal family systems. So there's a lot of things that you can fill in your resume with and your skill set with already. And then again, the psychedelic therapies are a tool. You have to be a healthy centered therapist and practitioner. So you have to do your own work before you go out and try to save the world. In fact, you shouldn't save the world. You should just really get yourself really healthy. And then when you come from a really good, healthy, embodied place, add in the therapies that you want to do that. But I would keep an eye out. Like I said, Vancouver Island University will have a program in the very soon future. I think UBC has a psychedelic research lab coming. University of Toronto, Queen's University, University of Ottawa had 3 programs last year. And then there's been big endowments that have gone to a number of universities in the US as well. And of course, there's synthesis in the Netherlands, there's a training in Jamaica. So there's a lot of things, and it'll just depend on people, I guess, what letters they'll want behind. I don't want to put them in quotation like a negative, but for me as an MD, I need to work within an MD license. So I will be in an accredited programs. So I wouldn't be able to do something that would not be recognized. So I think we're in a time of flux, and a positive flux. I think there's, like I said, somebody typed into the chat Fluence, and I've heard only good things about Fluence.
Are any of the programs you mentioned accredited already, or that's to come?
Well, the one that I'm involved in taking it through, it'll all be accredited. So it would be a postgraduate certificate.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then anything at a university would be accredited. That's it. Just goes with your credentials there, and then I think for the other programs that are out there, it would depend on who your regulatory agency is. If you're a nurse or if you're a psychologist, if they recognize it. And then the nice thing is with the university programs, for those people that are just coming into this space, like people that are just maybe starting their psychology degree, they'll have a very clear pathway. I think that pathway was going to be very, very clear. And for those that have been practicing in the underground, and thank you to all of them that have been holding that space very well, there'll be hopefully a clear pathway to move in. And the whole reason for regulation is patient safety. So people should feel okay about that you want to join an organization that holds your feet to the fire, to high integrity, to ethics, and that if you're not a good actor, you can be removed. So it's not a bad thing.
No, that's great. That's actually very reassuring as well. It makes you feel safe and know where you're going. So definitely agreed to that. And so in terms of also the patient journey, if we look at it from a point of view of traditionally, if we have an ailment or some sort of trauma or mental illness, the treatment is usually long-term or lifelong for many. So how can the insights that we're gaining today and in the future that we hope to gain transform that journey from one that's a lifelong treatment to maybe being cured? What is the hope there, and where do we see that those insights taking that journey? Sabrina?
I'll let Pamela go first.
I feel like I don't want to hog the time.
That's okay.
I'm really sorry. Well, I think so. Then it depends. It's kind of it depends, right? And I think Dr. Joe Tafur talks really nicely about this. Like some of these ailments, especially in the ayahuasca world, are not, the physical ailment is because of what's happening emotionally. And we're seeing that more and more and more, and we're finally talking about it in medicine, even though we've known it for a very, very long time. So clearly, if you can heal the trauma, a lot of the symptoms will leave. In some cases, like fibromyalgia will cease to exist, chronic fatigue syndrome will cease to exist, autoimmune conditions will cease to exist. And so this is a really interesting area. It's been studied for quite a while. Like what problems do you have because of the emotional distress you have, the somatic part of that? So in those cases, if your chronic pain is caused by, you know, your sexual assault when you were a child, and you can get to it with a psychedelic medicine, like maybe it's 1 or 2 or 3 treatments and you're done, and that ends the lifelong. However, if you're somebody that maybe is more prone to depression, maybe you'll be microdosing for the rest of your life. And then the question is the microdosing a better choice than the medication? What you want to do is you want to take the thing that has the least negative impact on your life and the most positive impact on your life. So it really is, it depends. And if you have the genetics of a neurodegenerative disease, and psilocybin is found to be, you know, a neurogenesis, you get neurogenesis with psilocybin or with ketamine, then maybe you want to be on lifelong. So I think this is really comes back to, you know, Sabrina's experience with clinical trials, is we have a lot of research to do to really tease out those answers.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I love about psychedelics is that, you know, traditionally when we look at pharmaceutical, it's all symptom management. You know, there's no cures, and, you know, pharmaceutical companies wouldn't make very good, you wouldn't make a lot of money if it was a cure, right? So it's really taking it on a daily basis, multiple times a day. And I love when we look at psychedelics, now obviously there has to be more research and larger scale research to really kind of validate, you know, how many sessions you would need and what the dosing would be and stuff like that. But I mean, it is very promising when we look at Mdma and we look at no, you know, 50 to 60% don't have symptoms. And we look at psilocybin, especially the study that looked at in comparison to citalopram, where we looked at how the results, you know, when you compare kind of the standard of practice with psilocybin. So those results are really, really promising. And one of the things that I love too is just like the different measures. Like we know that we have to have scales on depression to see if, and PTSD and stuff, but I love that we're looking at mystical experience questionnaire. We're looking at ego dissolution. Like it's just so, it really kind of changes what we measure as, you know, as efficacy, you know, like not just looking at the traditional scales that we've looked at in the past, but we're also looking at overall well-being. And I love that there's that therapy component, because we're so used to traditionally, you take a pill and you're on your own. And I think with this pandemic and everything going on, like people need people, you know, having someone with you in that journey, because, you know, there's a lot of people that have pushed down that trauma, and now you're bringing it and you're vulnerable and you're taking a psychedelic, and that therapy to assist that and really kind of dealing with that trauma is so huge, right? So I think it's just such a different way that we're addressing patients in medicine. And I think it's a long time overdue about how we look at how to heal ourselves. So it's just amazing. And now it's just a matter of putting that scientific rigor towards these new ways of looking at medicine. So kind of bridging that scientific piece, but also understanding the other kind of measurable things that are also important that we haven't traditionally measured.
And the reductionist, I think, is like really what you're talking about, right? Like we've been led down a path of reductionist medicine, like a single molecule for a single indication in this population, and we've cleaned it up. We've removed everybody. Like if you have high blood pressure or your cholesterol's off or you're a diabetic, you can't come in the door for the trial. And so that's really reductionist. And what we're looking at here, exactly what Sabrina's talking about, is like we're looking at the whole person. What else are they doing? What else matters? You know, it doesn't just matter that your blood pressure goes down, but are you happier? Do you feel good? Can you play with your kids or your grandkids? Can you go out? Like it's looking at the whole person. Again, it's just a return to wholeness. Like we've done this detour in medicine, and now we're coming back on path to really look at all these things. And the interesting thing for the clinical trials or the research is, how are we going to adjust our research to do this in a really good way? And can we go, it's okay if there's a placebo effect, like great. You know, if the placebo effect gets you out in life and having a great time, isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you, like, we don't have to say that's a negative thing. We can say, great, Joe got his life back. You know, that's a win, you know, and then also we need to learn how to Like trauma is complex. Like when people have complex trauma, they also often have lifestyle diseases, because if you can't eat well, you might have diabetes, and we have to figure out how to study these. And I think this is really going to be, if the policymakers are watching people that work in the FDA and Health Canada, help us help you, because we have to, the whole point of everything we're doing, spending millions and millions of dollars on these trials, is to come out with a clinical outcome that matters, not just another publication, not just another checkbox. Is to actually go, at the end of the day, can I, Pam Kryskow, as an MD, do something better or give some better advice to my patient? I want to put myself out of business. You know, I don't want to have patients. So we need the research so that people can get better and just do what they want to do, which is not come to the doctor's office. I can assure you that.
I remember when I did my first cannabis trial was chronic pain. And I remember, you know, having that research head of doing all these pharmaceutical studies. When the patient would come back, I was all excited because I looked at their pain score. When they took this product, they had a better pain score than this product, than this product. So they'd come back and they'd want that product. I'm like, no, but your pain scores are better with this product. And it was like, no, but I just feel better. I want that one instead, you know? And so it was just, you know, and I just went with the patient in terms of, and then I started adding more questions as the study went on, more of the quality life stuff, because it was like the quality of life stuff was much more important to that patient than anything to do with the pain scores, right? And so I just kind of had to, you know, start thinking about which one did you have a better experience with, as opposed to looking at the pain score. So
that's so telling, isn't it? So telling about what people want and what we all want for ourselves, and and how we view health and what it means to be healthy and happy, actually. So that's really amazing and a really great insight. So just taking a look at maybe the current industry, I wanted to ask, what are the current legal psychedelic therapies that are taking place in Canada, and how will access to those psychedelic therapies look in the future? So what's current?
Well, we know, ketamine's a psychedelic-like therapy, and it's clearly being used across the spectrum. I would argue that the best spectrum of that treatment is with therapy, as Sabrina has said many times. It is therapy. Therapy matters here. You know, of course, there's the IV ketamine clinics and for, you know, chronic pain and depression, and they serve a purpose. But I think whenever we can do something at a higher level, we should always aim for the higher level. And so ketamine is available, and I think we really should be pushing it to be covered in a psychotherapeutic model, and get the full benefit. I don't want people coming back for IV ketamine treatments for 4 years. If you're a company, yeah, sure you do, but I don't. I want them to, if they can go do a deep dive into their psyche and heal their trauma and get on with their life and never need to have it again, fantastic. So that's what's available right now in Canada with the Section 56 exemptions at the end of life. That's available right now for psilocybin, but Health Canada has been flooded with those. I'm told over 1,000 sit in queue, and they're like, "What the heck are we going to do with this?" So we are with medical assistance in dying in Canada. It's coming up for its parliamentary review, and we're actually right now one of the campaigns of the Canadian Psychedelic Association is to ask the members of parliament to say, if a patient qualifies for medical assistance in dying, then they qualify automatically for psilocybin at end of life. We think that's a no-brainer. And then that will open up a thoughtful, bigger conversation on who else has the right to psilocybin. So I suspect we'll see that. I think MAPS has proven beyond a doubt that Mdma should be a medicine. I question the rationale of having to continue to do the same trials over and over. It's almost becoming unethical to put that money towards those trials where it could be better served. I think we have proven Mdma helps in couples therapy. It helps in PTSD. Let's get going. And again, for the regulators, let us help you get there. Like, have some courage here. Like, this is it. You've got the evidence. Let's move forward. Let's get these medicines into the hands of therapists and patients, and we'll spend our time on the trials that haven't yet been done. So, like I said, psilocybin, Mdma definitely are on track to be medicines. They have to be at this stage, and LSD I can't really speak too much for. I don't know it well enough, but I think given that the studies out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s were so strong for LSD, we should be seeing that return among many other of the psychedelic-like medicines. Ibogaine is being studied by the Beckley Foundation in the UK. I suspect we're going to see that come back in. That seems to be a no-brainer with the opioid crisis. That with the results that you can get from Ibogaine and Iboga, that we should be finding a safe, a cardiac safe way of having that therapy available, and many others. So that's, if I could have it happen, I'd have it happen now, but I understand that we have to
go through the process.
Go
through the process. And Sabrina, was there anything that you wanted to add to that about?
No, I just want to say, is Ivy on the panel? I'm just wondering if.
I don't believe so.
Oh,
I'm not sure what's happening. I think that might be a technical.
I just wanted to make sure that you know, if she was going to say something that.
No, sorry, Ivy, we're not ignoring you.
Yeah, no, sorry, Sabrina. I think it's because I was on one of the previous panels, and it still has me up as a panelist. So sorry, I've been squatting on this.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to make sure we're not missing if we're supposed to
for sure.
talk and tell your story or anything like that. Okay.
Sorry, Ivy, we weren't ignoring you. So one of the next thing I want to ask was, because it's WWC, and we want to know, what advice would you give other women interested in entering the psychedelic research space?
Jump in.
Okay, I'll jump in. So it depends on, you know, what the person's background is as a researcher, right? So if they're on drug development, then, you know, look at who's in Canada or wherever country you're in, like what companies are developing psychedelics right now, right? You can even look at something like clinicalgov.com if you want to kind of see who's actively about to start clinical trials or doing clinical trials. You filter by your country. If you're more on the researcher, coordinator, project manager on that research side, then you're going to want to look at any companies that are actually doing research. So definitely, you know, if you have a passion for this, you have a passion for mental health, addiction, or even of the therapeutical areas in which psychedelic is being used for, definitely, you know, start looking at what's out there. You know, I know that some people volunteer for MAPS Canada. You know, like I'm leading the research committee. I mean, we are not conducting research, but we are doing blogs and summaries. And I'm learning a lot myself just being part of that committee. Right. So, you know, you're with like-minded people having discussions and part of that kind of MAPS community. So if you're looking at volunteering, also the Clinical Research Association of Canada that I'm part of, we're actually looking to conduct a psychedelic and cannabis 2-day research conference in the fall. So if you're more kind of involved in kind of getting to know the industry and helping to plan for that, it is volunteer as well. And my company, we're going to start to be looking for project managers, coordinators, and, you know, the diversity is really important for us, for our researchers. So if that's something you're interested in, you can just flip me a message, because we're starting to ramp up on clinical research work and we're always interested. We really need a research analyst. So I'm going to put it out there. I need a research analyst for a project that we're doing now. So, you know, reach out to me as well.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. And you know what I think we should do, Sabrina? I think we should do a MAPS Canada, Canadian Psychedelic Association combined, you know, topic just on this for all our young researchers, or people that just want to get involved, or people that have been researching and want to get involved and figure out how can they put their hands forward there. And you know, if you're you said reach out to us and we'll help you get connected with the area you're interested in. Look at who's researching, reach out to them. And there are a lot of research conferences, and by watching at the conferences, you can see who's presenting on what topics. And I think psychedelic researchers are a very friendly bunch. So if you can find them on LinkedIn or something and just say, hey, I love what you're doing. And I mean, we've got with our concussion and TBI and our Alzheimer's, we're also, everybody's looking for people to work together and help out in many hands. And often it's just making that connection. And then we can go, you know what, I'm not actually studying what you're interested in, but my friend is. So let me connect you to them. And, you know, it's a very friendly bunch of people. And you know, there's a lot of courses you need to take. It is a friendly community. There's a lot of, there is courses you need to take. And and training,
but there's also support, which is great for anyone interested in getting involved. So one of the final questions that I have there been any studies on using for severe chronic pain, especially where CBD hasn't been effective? So where CBD hasn't been effective, but psychedelics has for severe chronic pain.
That's a hard, I can give some general answers on that. So we did look at the myself and my colleague Dr. Devin Christie. We did pull out the one of the MAPS researchers when I was talking to them a couple of years ago said, oh, you know, there's all this chronic pain data that nobody's looked at in the MDMA trials. So we were able to look at that and see with the people that went through the MDMA PTSD trial, and we saw some data there that not in the severe trauma group, but in the medium kind of cohort of people that had PTSD did quite well with MDMA. Their pain dropped. We suspect that the group that was in the higher severity of trauma, it didn't, but probably more hypothetically that maybe you're just numb at that stage. You're just not at a stage where you can actually feel your pain because of the trauma. And then as the trauma comes down with the MDMA therapy, our hypothesis is that maybe then you feel your pain and then the pain will start to drop. Ketamine's excellent for chronic pain and depression. It hits two things really well. And even before we were seeing the IV clinics for depression, there was many of my patients in chronic pain were having monthly infusions with IV ketamine, and surprised they felt better and they were happier. And you know, which happens first, who cares, they're better. Excuse me. And then I think anytime you deal with existential stress and discomfort, and you're going to feel better. You know, if you can get to the trauma and you can clean up, and we all have trauma. Like some people have huge trauma, some people have little trauma, and it can be little trauma that causes a lot of pain. So you don't have to think the problem's big. So I think anytime that you can really get back to self of who you are, get back to your true self and use these medicines as an assistant with a good therapist and a good therapeutic alliance, you're going to find that pain drops.
When I worked in a pain clinic a number of years ago, I found that people on ketamine and cannabis was very successful in terms of combination for their neurological pain or severe chronic pain. I also find that a lot of people with chronic pain need THC along with CBD. That's just been my experience with patients. So CBD alone doesn't, is not for everybody for their pain, right? So I do see that THC along with it, but even better outcomes when I've had patients with ketamine as well in terms of pain reduction.
Amazing. Okay. Oh, and I see Katie. Thank you so much, Sabrina and Dr. Pam. That was really insightful and really informative conversation. Thank you so much.